Good day to you, my glorious undergraduates. Today is the beginning of week 7. I know that's wild to think about, but here we are. Today we're going to talk about personal and social development. So, let's just jump right in. So today we're going to talk a lot about what makes us who we are as people, which is always kind of a fun thing to discuss. So obviously heredity and environment interact to shape your personality. You know, the things you inherit from the people you come from and also the environment you find yourself raised in make you who you are. No use having the nature versus nurture conversation. Both of them are what make you what you are. So, some children, despite having normal, stable personality traits, they will behave differently depending on what the context is. So, as they age, generally their self-perception becomes more realistic, it gets more abstract, and it becomes more stable. We'll talk a little bit about what that all means as we go. So, the thing that really has a big impact on children's behavior is self-perception. How they feel about themselves and how they think about themselves has a lot to do with the way they act. And the reverse of that is also true. How a child acts can often get them feedback from the outside world that then makes them have a difference in their self-perception. For example, if, let's take a student with ADHD, for example. If that child is out in the world and they are constantly being told not to touch things, to sit still, not to, talk as much as they talk, not to, make their room so messy, if they're constantly told that they're disorganized and that they're, not living up to their potential, well then those outside influences will make that child's self-perception a lot less happy than it could be. And in the other sense, maybe this has happened to that child, so now that their self-perception is not as good as it could be, they may say, well, if that's what people think of me, then it must be true, so I must be a loser, I must be a jerk, I must be a forgetful person who, can't make things happen and can't be successful in the world, so why even try, right? And they may go out into the world and stop working on things and stop doing what they need to do in school. And that's a negative example, but there are also positive examples. If we teach children that they are capable of solving problems, then their self-perception is higher. And if they perceive themselves as someone who is capable of solving problems, then they may go out in the world and attempt to solve problems. Which they probably would not do otherwise, right? So, on top of their own self-perception, other people's behaviors, gender, group memberships will also affect children's sense of self. The people that you're around have a role in shaping how you feel about who you are. And then, influence or no influence, kids will decide who they are and socialize themselves without anyone sort of interfering with them, which is why sometimes you'll hear a parent say, I don't know where she got this, independence that she seems to have, or I don't know, my kid is obsessed with cars and I have no idea why, like no one in our family is into cars, because they're individuals, they're little people, and they have their own things that they love and their own things that they think and the things that they want to be that are completely independent of whoever raised them, and sometimes also of their environments, which is kind of amazing. We're going to talk a little bit about identity and what that means. It's your definition of who you are. It is what you think you are and what you think is important to do in life. And what is meaningful to you. Note that the definition says it is self-constructed, because identity, while it may be influenced by outside characteristics, is, in the end, entirely determined by you, right? So take a few minutes and do yourself this little activity here. Write 10 words or phrases that describe the kind of person that you are. Feel free to pause, take a little time to do that, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so whatever you wrote down tells you about you, right? If you were able to be objective, which is really hard to do, we all have sort of a skewed, not exactly accurate 100% view of who we are and what we are. But if you could have been objective about it, let's say you could, then, this will tell you a lot about your personality. And we define personality as your ways of behaving, thinking, and feeling, right? And all of that is made up of a lot of things. You can see the lovely identity cloud that sort of looks like a sun that maybe a 6-year-old drew. It consists of a lot of things that go into making up your identity. Your possessions have something to do with it. Creations, the things you make, your choices, your beliefs, your ethnicity and culture, your habits, your family, all of these things go into creating your sense of who you are as a person. So the first theory we're going to look at today is Erikson. We're going to do a very brief discussion of Erikson because you guys are making those cool posters, which we'll all get a chance to take a look at later. So Erikson thought that life consisted of 8 stages. And when people develop in a good way, in a healthy way, they will go through all of these stages at some point in their lives. You have to successfully complete one stage before you move to the next one. There's no overlap. You can't be half in, let's say, trust and mistrust and half in autonomy versus shame and doubt. It doesn't work like that. You have to go from one to the next, and it's a clean break between each one. So, he also believed that if you did not successfully complete those stages, you would have issues later in life. Each stage corresponds roughly to an age. So the stage of trust versus mistrust, as we work our way up, corresponds to infants, while autonomy versus shame and doubt corresponds to toddlers. Initiative versus guilt is preschoolers. Industry versus inferiority is grade schoolers. Identity versus role confusion is teenager. Intimacy versus isolation is young adult. Middle-aged adult is generativity versus stagnation. And older adult is integrity versus despair. So, stage 1, trust versus mistrust. Usually this is infants, 0 to a year, give or take. So babies have a lot of needs that need to be met. And who should have to do this? But of course the parents, right? So the parents are going to be interacting with the baby, and as this is happening, the baby is kind of making their little view of what the world is like and how things work, right? So if a baby's basic needs are met, they will develop trust. If, however, the environment they're living in does not meet those basic needs, or the parents don't meet their basic needs, then a baby will not develop trust. They will, in fact, develop mistrust. So, if a baby is constantly crying for attention and comfort, and they never get it, eventually they're going to stop thinking that the people around them or their caretakers will actually take care of them. This causes some serious attachment issues later in life, right? Okay, so stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt, right? Toddlers around 2 to 3 years of age. This is where kids need to start feeling like they're their own person a little bit. They start wanting to have more control, more independence, more autonomy. Right? So basically, at this point, parents are starting to let the child explore a little bit. They try to do it in a safe way, in a safe place. The parents are there to help. And that creates a sense of autonomy in the child. However, if the parents are real strict and they do not allow the child the space to do that exploration safely and don't support them, well, then the child will gain a whole lot of shame, right? And doubt. I remember, I think of a cousin of mine who, her parents were very, very restrictive with her, and whenever she tried to do something, like, for example, put the toys away, she was often told, no, I'll do it for you, you won't do it right. And then the toys were taken from her and put away. And as a result, she started feeling like she couldn't really try new things because she was just convinced that she would do it badly, right? And this will maybe come up again in a later stage, but that is, she started doubting her own abilities, right? Because of that. And that's what happens if you don't successfully create a sense of autonomy in a child. Stage 3, initiative versus guilt. So that'll be preschool, or like early kindergarten, so around 4 to 6 years. This is where the child learns to take initiative, to start things on their own, to jump out there and try things on their own. They start taking some risks. Usually they're not aware of how big those risks are or how small they may be, which is why they still need parents to support them, and maybe talk them off the ledge from taking initiative or taking a risk in a situation that they're not developmentally ready to handle just yet, right? But, if we successfully do that, then there'll be a person who can get out there and try new things and, start doing their own things, like picking out their clothes, as the meme shows us, or, deciding where things go in their rooms. But if not, then they will develop a sense of guilt, right? So if their parents are constantly telling them what they're doing is bad or is silly, if what they're doing is downplayed all the time, then they will start to feel guilty about the decisions that they've made or the initiatives that they took. Right? So stage 4, industry versus inferiority, is childhood from about 7 to 12. So, early elementary school to pre-adolescence, pretty much. So at this point in life, kids are super eager to learn. They're really curious about the world. They want to stuff their little brains with everything they can possibly learn, particularly about things they're interested in. They're starting to read, they're starting to write, they can tell time now. All those things, big important things are starting to be part of their repertoire. We start encouraging them to make things, to do things. They're making drawings, they're making crafts, they're trying out new stuff, like learning to ride a bike. All of this stuff is becoming a big part of their world during those years, right? So, if we encourage those kids to keep learning and practicing and motivating them, then they will develop industry, right? That motivation to do more, to keep learning and practicing. But if a child gets made fun of or punished for what they try to do, or if they're just not meeting some expectations from the adults in their lives, then they start feeling inferior, right? And that can be very demotivating to students. It makes them not want to try anymore, right? So let's say, I'm learning to ride a bike. And I am, struggling a little bit, but I'm constantly being told, hey, this is not easy, we know, but you're gonna get it. You just, here's some tips to help you out with it. And, maybe I'll hold the bike for you. Or, hey, it's all right if you feel like you need to have your training wheels on a little bit longer. No big deal. You just got to keep at it. then eventually I'm probably gonna actually learn to ride that bike, and that would be industry. But if, my parents are constantly making fun of me, like, my gosh, you have no balance, do you? Like, you have to, silly, you have to tie your shoes before you, start riding this bike, or you're gonna get your, shoe laces stuck in the wheels, and then you're gonna fall. Or if they laugh at me when I fall off my bike, or, they're like, why is this taking you so long? Your sister learned how to do this, really quickly. What's wrong with you? Why can't you be like your sister? Well, then that's going to cause me to feel a sense of inferiority. Major apologies to anyone I just triggered with the why can't you be like your sister example, because God knows a lot of people have issues with their parents comparing them to siblings. Hope that wasn't your case, but if it was, I apologize for making you relive those moments. Stage 5. This is teenage years, 13 to 19-ish, right? So, stage 5 is identity versus role confusion. The main job of this stage is figuring out who you are and who you want to be. So, you start thinking, like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And yeah, you think about that before you reach this stage, but it's never quite as real or quite as salient. Or like a decision you're going to have to make really quickly, like when you're 18 and you're about to graduate high school, the way that, it is during this stage. So sometimes teenagers spend a lot of time experimenting, trying to figure out, what roles they want to fill and what behaviors and activities they're into. Sometimes that leads them to make poor choices, and they'll do things that are not great. And sometimes it leads them to make really good choices that put them on a cool trajectory for, the next stage of their lives. Right? So, the brain is not entirely developed at this point in the game, right? Your prefrontal cortex doesn't totally finish up until you're in your 20s. So, there's going to be some impulsivity and some just making choices without totally thinking them through, and that sort of thing. But that is pretty normal for teenagers. The job of people who are trying to guide teenagers, be it parents or teachers, is to help them reduce the times when they make decisions without thinking it through, and to be there to help them do some of that thinking that maybe they have a hard time doing on their own at this stage. Right? So, once they've gotten, hopefully, a little sense of identity, they won't have a ton of role confusion. Yeah, there's going to be some. Every kid is going to have some confusion about who they are and where they belong and what they should be doing. It's like the quintessential problem of the teenage years. And again, sorry for the triggering I'm definitely doing right now, because some of you are not that far past this stage in your life. And so you may be remembering some of the not so great choices or embarrassing attempts at trying on new roles or new behaviors that you did when you were a teenager. I know I don't always like to think about those things, so sorry. Why don't we just continue on? So stages 6 through 8 are adulthood stages, and they are totally they're outside the scope of what we talk about in this class. Because we're not talking about adults here, we're talking about K through 12 education. So, just to give you a basic idea of what those are, because, why not? Intimacy versus isolation, that's your 20s, usually. And that's you trying to create your own, social network. You trying to find, hopefully, a partner for yourself, if that's what you want. And then generativity versus stagnation, that's, your 30s to, it's your working years, basically. It's like your 30s up until, your 50s or retirement age. And in that one, it's, will you be producing things? Will you be generating, wealth and comfort and, a good life for yourself? Or will you get stuck and not create all those things. So that's generativity versus stagnation. And then the last one is for elderly adults. Think post-retirement adults. Will you maintain your integrity or will you fall into despair? So, will you be a person who, maintains your dignity in old age, and finds some way to continue living meaningfully in your old age? Or will you be a person who, kind of falls apart? I think we've all heard of, the really sad old people who after they retire and they don't really know what to do with themselves anymore, and so they just kind of get depressed. So it's that. It's, the difference between finding a way to live a meaningful life at that elderly stage of your life or not, basically. You can take a look at some time at this lovely chart. It's in the slides that are on Brightspace. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because we have a lot to talk about, but you can totally take a look at that. Okay, so morality. Let's talk morality. It is one's standards regarding right and wrong behavior. Ideally, you want your person's morality to prioritize behaviors that are good not only for that person, but also for others in their lives and for society, right? You should be concerned, hopefully, we hope, with the rights and the welfare of other people as well as yourself. I know that's a tall ask for some people. It's a lot to ask from some people, but that is what we hope you will be as a person who has a moral code. We're always trying to talk in education about, promoting pro-social behavior, which is behavior directed toward promoting the well-being of another person. So, helping other people out. Being aware of the harm that we might do to other people and trying to reduce or mitigate that harm as much as we can. Trying to actively alleviate harm that has happened to other people or, defend them from harm. These are things we would consider pro-social behaviors. I apologize for the dog in the background. She is having a day, and she's driving me crazy, so I hope she's not driving you crazy also. Alright, so, Kohlberg was the guy who had the most used theory of moral development in education. He said there were 3 levels of moral development, and that they each had 2 stages. So, we had the pre-conventional, the conventional, and the post-conventional stages. Here's a little bit about the levels and the stages. So, level 1, pre-conventional morality. Basically, stage 1 is punishment avoidance and obedience. So, little kids are in this one quite a bit because, they're making decisions about what's moral or what's right or wrong based on self-interest. They don't really have a lot of empathy coming into that equation at this point in life. It's just basically they do not want to be punished. They will obey. If a punishment is forthcoming, if there's going to be a negative consequence. However, they will also break some rules. Break them if they feel like they're not going to get caught and there will be no punishment for it. I know some people who are adults who are like that, so maybe not everybody gets out of stage 1. Stage 2, right, after they come out of that, you have what we call the exchange of favors, which means, they've started to understand that other people have personalities and needs and wants of their own. But still they're more likely to prioritize their own needs. Again, not necessarily a thing all adults have grown out of, but very common in children of a certain age. Right, so once they get out of that, they've hit level 2, which is conventional morality, right? So, stage 3 or stage 4, we call this the good boy or the good girl or the good MB stage. At this point they're trying to make decisions based on other people and what will make other people happy, right? This is where they become people pleasers. They're very worried about relationships at this point and maintaining good and healthy relationships with people. That does not necessarily mean they're adept at doing so or that they really know how to maintain those relationships with other people, but they're very concerned with it. They're very worried about it. Once they get past that, you get to stage 4, which is the law and order stage, right? Rather than just looking to the people in their immediate vicinity to know what's right or wrong, they've started looking at what society thinks of as right or wrong. They're pretty inflexible about rules at this point in the game. If it's a rule, it can't be broken. Done. Period. Oh, and they don't understand that just because something is a rule in one place doesn't mean it will be a rule everywhere just yet. That would be level 3, which is post-conventional morality, right? So stage 5 is what we call the social contract. They know their rules, but they aren't just like, okay, when you're a kid, you just think the rules are just set in stone and they come out of nowhere. They're just in the universe floating around and everybody has to abide by them. They're the same for everybody, right? You don't really think too hard about where the rules come from. But when you become social contract stage, you start to realize that people made up the rules. Children of divorce often have to reckon with this, right? Like the rule at their dad's house about what time they have to go to bed might be very different from the rule at their mom's house about what time they have to go to bed. So they're starting to understand that, like, rules are made up by people, and agreed to by people individually or by society, and that they can change. That just because the rule exists in one place or in one context doesn't mean it exists everywhere. It's quite the adjustment. And then the last stage here is stage 6, which is universal ethical principle. That's a mouthful. Try saying that 5 times fast, right? So at this point, it's not so much about individual spelled out rules anymore. It's more about, these abstract principles that they adhere to. So, they have a sense of what is fair or what is just or what is right. Kindness, respect. They have a sense of what behaviors fit under those categories, right? And which ones don't. And so that's more or less what they follow in every situation. So they no longer need to know, what exactly is the specific rule. It's, what is just conduct? What is kind conduct? This is when they've really developed what we would call the conscience, right? The little voice inside of them that tells them whether something is right or wrong, even though there's no specific concrete rule. So, one of the things that teachers do is help students develop as humans. We're not just helping students learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, or social studies or art. We're also helping them figure out who they are as people and become better versions of themselves as people, right? So, it's up to us to it says accommodate students' diverse temperaments. And we talk a lot about building relationships with our students and knowing our students so that we can work with whatever's going on with them personality-wise. Some students may be very artistic. And so, we give them opportunities to show that off in class. Some students may be very shy and very much don't enjoy speaking out in front of others. So we give them opportunities to shine in ways that don't require speaking. Like, maybe their writing is really great. So we allow them to share their thoughts in writing instead of, speaking out loud in a discussion. Things like that. We're supposed to help students figure out who they are and who they want to become. And that's true at every age. From the time they're preschoolers all the way up to seniors in high school. You know, we're always talking about creating the warm, supporting environment. And also, you know, but with clear standards and expectations. You know, some behaviors are unacceptable in the classroom, and that needs to be made clear and consistently made clear, right? And then, you know, when you're a middle school teacher or a high school teacher, part of your job is to channel adolescents' risk-taking tendencies into safer activities, instead of letting them go out into the world and get into all kinds of trouble. Right? I was a debate coach for like 10 years. And, you know, one of the fun things for me was watching kids who would otherwise be out in the world starting arguments with their friends and their family because they just really love to challenge the opinions and thoughts of others. Instead of them, you know, using it to kind of put dents in their interpersonal lives. And make everybody around them annoyed with them, using it to learn more about interesting topics and go out and discuss those topics with other students. You know, and sometimes they won trophies for it, and sometimes they, you know, got a nice boost of self-esteem because they were able to prove that they could do that competently. Right? So, you know, it was a risk still. It was still an intellectual and social risk to go and debate. Because, you know, what if you said something wrong? What if you know, looked like an idiot in front of other people? You know, what if your ideas weren't accepted or respected? You know, what if the person who was debating against you was mean to you, right? Like, there were risks involved. But those risks were a lot safer than going out into the world and, you know, arguing with absolutely everybody you know and alienating your friends and family. So, you know, debaters will argue about anything. So I honestly think, you know, we may have saved some kids from destroying relationships over those 10 years. They would just take it out in debate class. It was totally fine. Right? So, you know, some things that teachers can do to encourage, you know, these interpersonal skills that we want kids to get. We have got to foster perspective taking and also empathy. Empathy is not a thing kids naturally have, right? It's a thing we have to talk about and work with them about. You have to help them see other people's points of view, and to understand, you know, how they would feel if they were in similar situations. You know, we should talk to kids a lot about what popularity actually is, because I think there's a kind of a skewed view of what popularity actually is, yeah? You know, popularity is not a thing we should strive for, to the exclusion of our own identity. It's not a thing we should subsume or play down our own identities in order to achieve, because, you know, that never actually leads to happiness. Right? And then, you know, we should be teaching social skills to students who do have trouble interacting with others for whatever reason. You know, we gotta address the bullying issue, like it or not. You know, and really help people see what bullying actually does to someone. And not just the person who's the victim of the bully, but the ways that it's actually harmful to the bully themselves. And then, you know, we have to keep our eye on that. Sure, you know, the bullying, we can't be allowing kids to be aggressive with each other. And some schools do an excellent job with that, and some do a horrible job with that. And we've all seen the fallout of what happens when we don't address those issues. You know, we should discourage inappropriate communication. You know, we live in the social media age, and, you know, kids are now able to bully each other after school hours, which was not a thing when I was a kid. When I was a kid, in the 6th grade, I had a bully. And she had been my friend before when we were in elementary school too, which made it kind of worse. But at least when I left the school building, I could go home and, you know, she didn't have my home phone number, because we all had phones in our houses then, not cell phones. She couldn't call me. and therefore could not harass me when I was at home. But nowadays, we have cell phones in our pockets and social media, and you can be harassed all the time, day and night, right? So it's important that we teach students not to do those things, obviously, and also how to respond or what to do if it happens to them, right? And, generally I like this last one. We're supposed to promote understanding, communication, and interaction among diverse groups. Students will often try to group themselves with people who are just like them, which is understandable in the sense that it makes them feel safe. But, we don't get to do that in the real world of adulthood. Generally, when we go out into the workforce, we have to interact with all kinds of people in society. So, it's important that we take people who wouldn't otherwise interact with each other, and give them ways and reasons to interact with each other and help them understand what's going on with other people so that when they're adults, they can do those things. Right? So, teachers, when it comes to moral and pro-social behavior, there's a lot we can do, right? So students need models to follow always, right? Like examples of what moral and pro-social behavior looks like. Just telling them that a certain behavior is good or is bad is often not enough. You have to actually kind of show it in action, right? And a lot of this will come in the form of social studies classes or English classes, right? We'll pick somebody out who's done something amazing in history, been a good leader, been a good volunteer, or been an awesome person just in general, and we'll talk about those people and the choices they made. And those are models for the students to follow. We should be discussing moral and social issues in class. There might be some parents and politicians and other people in society who disagree with that, who think that that's the parent's job only, but we also know that parents, to a lesser or greater degree, may be involved or not involved in teaching their children those things. And also, sometimes the things that parents will teach their children about morality and social behavior are not great. Think about it this way. A lot of members of the KKK, which still exists, and, other, scary white supremacist groups have children, and they will often pass on their beliefs and their morals, that we don't interact with or socialize with people of color to their children. Well, those are not exactly, moral or pro-social things we want students to be thinking or doing. So, that counter messaging has to come from somewhere, and it might as well be school, if it's not going to happen at home. So, we have to discourage all forms of cheating to help students build, that personal integrity. Make it hard for them to cheat. To start with, make it hard. Make it hard for them to do it. And also help them understand why it's a disservice to themselves, right? Like, a lot of students don't really think too hard about why cheating is hurting them, You're just not learning if you're cheating. You're not proving to yourself that you can do things independently if you're cheating. There's a million things you can say, but, to help them understand why cheating their way through life is going to hurt not only themselves, but maybe others, is an important part of what we do as educators. And another thing we can do is get kids involved in community service. Offer them opportunities to go out and help in the community. Take them on trips to go see community organizations that are doing really great work. Give them volunteer opportunities. The school I used to teach at had a requirement for juniors that they do what's called a service learning project, which is a little bit like community service, but on steroids. So, they would research a problem that's happening in the community And then they would link up with some organizations or activists or whatever out in the community who were working on that problem and learn about the work that they did and different needs that the organization or the activists might have. And then and only then would they jump in and volunteer. And half the time they were dragging their friends and a good chunk of the student body along with them to do it. But giving students a sense of responsibility to the community hopefully will lead them to be adults who also have a sense of responsibility to their community and who will do things in their adult lives and make decisions in their adult lives that will be good for the people around them instead of bad. Right, so ignore this part right here. You're not presenting posters because, hi, we're online. This is an online class. But I hope that was a pretty decent intro to you for personal and moral development. I look forward to diving into our next topic at a later date. Please, as always, let me know if you have questions, and best of luck to you as you continue your EDC 312 journey.